We're all tempted to treat Commander as a silly format where dud cards in every new set go to dwell. It's a place where all kinds of odd shenanigans come into play, where the point is not necessarily to achieve anything, but to treat the game like a grand experiment just to see what happens. While there is absolutely nothing wrong with playing Commander just to see fun things occur, we're going to be taking the perspective in this lesson of a more competitive player in today's episode of Tolarian Tutor. We will look at a very focused and optimized form of Commander, one that adopts a more measured approach to the format. We're not here to play crazy combos that don't progress the game. We're here to talk strategy and gameplay. And we'll also cover some observations and tips to help you become a more thoughtful and successful Commander player. Welcome to the Tolarian Tutor Elder Dragon Highlander Special. Now, I've mentioned this often enough on Tolarian Tutor for it to become our unofficial motto, but we're serious when we say it. When you sit down to play a game of Magic with anyone, it isn't enough to say that your goal is to win. The question is, how are you going to get there? What is your plan? Despite the fact that you're facing several other opponents, one of the best ways to win in Commander isn't always interacting with other players. It's to focus almost exclusively on getting to your goal and winning. Do you want to create a bunch of squirrels and cast Craterhoof Behemoth, thus trampling everyone with giant rodents? Of course you do. Or are you trying to get an infinite combo online that locks everyone out of the game? However you're going to win, you need to focus on that and make every turn you have all about progressing the game in your favor. For example, a Perforos, God of the Forge deck, wants to get Perforos out, then have 20 creatures enter the battlefield, dealing the requisite 40 damage to all opponents. If anyone tries to get cheeky and gain life, they face the brunt of your ragtag army of goblins and Mir. A well-tuned version of this deck wants to ramp quickly to get Perforos out at least a turn early, and play cards that generate multiple creature enter the battlefield effects, like Goblin Rabblemaster or Norrin the Wary. Almost every card in this deck will be devoted to at least one of these two goals. In contrast, a Kruphix God of Horizons deck might be looking to use Kruphix's mana storage to ramp out Massive Eldrazi with game-altering effects like Void Winnower or Ulamog the Ceaseless Hunger. This invites a very different game plan, with big mana ramp cards like Explosive Vegetation and untap effects from creatures like Seedborn Muse. Now, of course, we need to act as if a threat is on the board or something else is preventing us from winning. But despite how much we want to answer everything our opponents are doing, preventing other people from winning does not, I repeat, does not help you win. In higher levels of Commander, it is not at all unusual to see entire decks that focus on one or two combo pieces that create an almost instant win, since that's a great way to knock out multiple players at once. However, even if you don't have a deck that focuses on this, you still need to figure out how you can fetch those pieces, put them into play, and protect them. With that in mind, let's look at how we can optimize our playstyle and our decks to become a better Commander player. Now we need to talk about evaluating cards, specifically exponential versus linear advantage. The first observation we can make about Commander is that it's a multiplayer format, with of course the exception of French and Magic Online 1-on-1, but we won't go into that here. How does the presence of at least two additional players change your strategy, your goals, and the composition of your deck? Let's look at some numbers. In a normal game of Magic, 50% of all card draws in an average game belong to you. On their beginning phase, your opponent will draw a card, and then you'll draw a card on your turn. When we look at threats and answers, this broadly means that one of your cards has equal value to that of your opponent's. For example, your cast out can be traded for their Glory Bringer. In a four-person game of Commander, only 25% of all card draws in a game are yours. If you look at the ratio of your card draws to the card draws that your opponents have, have. That ratio is 1 to 3. That means that one of your cards is usually only equal to 1/3 of what it would normally be in terms of its effectiveness on the board. So given that your cards are now on average only worth about 1/3 of their normal value, we need to figure out how to make the cards in your deck more capable of handling multiple opponents. Versatility and wide-reaching effects is the key here. So cards that can handle multiple threats to your victory all at once are important. This is what we call exponential advantage, when one card is able to address several problems as opposed to linear one-for-one trade-offs. Next, it's really important that we discuss single-target cards versus wraths. The first thing we can do is get rid of limiting single-target spells like Lightning Bolt, Doomblade, and Oblivion Ring. Gone. These are all cards that will work well in most one-to-one formats, but there's a reason why you don't see a mono-red burn deck in Commander. Well, not too often anyway. Sure, you can maybe get rid of one opponent or one threat, but what does that matter when you might be facing down multiple threats, multiple opponents, and still have other things that you don't have answers for? This is one of the reasons why Wrath effects, cards that destroy all creatures or who have other wide-reaching destructive effects, are so important in Commander. When you're facing down a souped-up Olivia Voldaren, an Ur-Dragon, and an Elish Norn with a small army, you need ways to be able to answer all of these threats at once. Cards like Damnation, Rout, Wrath of God, Grasp of Fate, or even an overloaded Cyclonic Rift are essential to your Commander deck. These cards not only address multiple threats at once, but return the board state into something more manageable and push your opponents back, giving you time to push for the win while they're rebuilding their advantage. For one card, you're able to get rid of several barriers to your victory at once, giving you an exponential return on your investment. Now let's take a moment to discuss creatures. In the same way we evaluate removal spells by how well they give us exponential returns, we can measure creatures in the same way. When you do play creatures in Commander, you want them to be able to either progress your plans for victory or push your opponents back in some way. Therefore, it's important to play creatures that can have a wide-reaching effect on the board state. Let's take a look at Imperious Perfect, for example. At first glance, Imperious Perfect looks like a powerful card for a reasonable price. It pumps all of your elves in an elf deck, and for green and a tap can give you a 1/1 elf. However, the overall impact that it has on the board is rather minimal. Sure, your creatures might be a little stronger, but not sizably enough to take out all your opponents at once, or dissuade a larger creature from coming at you. Also, tapping to produce a 1/1 elf per turn doesn't give you much in the way of board presence or power. In contrast, let's look again at our big, cuddly friend, Craterhoof Behemoth. Sure, it's an expensive 8-drop that requires triple green, but its abilities are well worth the cost. Though it's just a 5/5 to start with, its Enter the Battlefield effect gives all creatures trample, and gives it haste and +X+X, where X is the total number of creatures you control. Dropping Craterhoof Behemoth when you have a horde of squirrels, snakes, or elves can be terrifying for all of your opponents, and if left to resolve, will usually kill everyone else quickly. Let's look at another creature that can progress the game to your advantage. Sheoldred, the Whispering One. For 5 and 2 black, the 6/6 Sheoldred comes with Swamp Walk, always a great combo with Urborg, Tomb of Yawgmoth, and brings back a creature from your graveyard to the battlefield at the beginning of your upkeep. And, most importantly, forces your opponents to sacrifice a creature at the beginning of their upkeep. Though she isn't much of an instant win as Craterhoof Behemoth, the advantage Sheoldred can give you by keeping your board presence and reducing your opponents is substantial and must be addressed. A card that has done well in recent standard events that doesn't translate well in Commander is God Pharaoh's Gift. Its power level is severely reduced in a multiplayer matchup since it only triggers on your combat step, which is only 1 out of every 4 turns. If we look at other cards like Rashmi, Eternity's Crafter, and Vile Smasher, we can see that their effect can happen during every turn, which allows them to scale well with more than one opponent. So when evaluating which creatures go in your deck, you need to keep in mind the impact they should have on the board and the advantage they give you. If they aren't giving you a significant push, then it's worth reevaluating their presence in your 99. Next is a very important lesson. Let's discuss cards that do nothing except make people upset. Another way to critically evaluate your cards is to ask what purpose they have in helping you actually win the game. It's often tempting to put in cards that have oppressive effects like Tanglewire or Infernal Darkness and laugh as your opponents curse you as they stumble on mana or tap down their creatures. But if these cards don't actually move the game forward or mesh with your game plan, then they are not worth keeping in your deck. All they'll do is make the rest of the table mad at you, which may cause an early demise for you and your chances at winning. There do exist viable and competitive decks that try to lock down the board with hate cards like Stasis or Winter Orb, but this isn't something to go halfway on. Having some hate pieces that are specific to your meta can help deal an opponent whose game plan is faster than yours, like Rest in Peace for graveyard decks or Torpor Orb for Perforos. You'll still want to be wary of when you want to actually play those cards, as they often will affect other players as well, and can turn you into a target. Be political. Get your opponents to agree with you on the threat, and then play out your hate. Alright, we need to discuss interaction, a vital component. We've said before that the best way of playing Commander and winning is to focus almost exclusively on getting your win condition online. However, there are times when you are going to see something very scary hit the battlefield. When should you respond, and what should you respond to? Like beginner control players, Commander fans can be a little trigger happy with answers. So we need to remember what we covered in our How to Be a Better Control Player lesson. When do you say yes? The best way of considering threats in Commander is to ask yourself, how much is this card preventing you from winning the game? Keeping your plan in mind, consider how much the card affects you. Is it a game-winning combo, such as Palinchron and Deadeye Navigator, or Triskelion and Mikaeus? Then, it might be a good idea to either use that Force of Will, Swords to Plowshares, or Pact of Negation to make sure the game can continue to your advantage. The other category of cards that need answering are ones that completely lock you out of your win condition or severely impact your strategy. For example, Rest in Peace will completely shut down graveyards, locking out any hapless zombie masters at the table. A card like Elish Norn could completely take out your token strategy and give its controller a serious advantage. These are the cards that are worth answering, so don't bother with smaller fish like Rhystic Study or Soul Ring. Save your firepower and your counterspells on what matters so that you can focus on the win. Next, we need to discuss the Pitfalls of Bling. In the past, I've reviewed gorgeous deck boxes that are custom made for Commander, some that are hand cast from resin or carved from exotic woods to show off your blinged out decks. Of course, EDH is where we often put our most expensive cards, but remember, there's no reason for you to include a masterpiece such as an Invocation or Invention if it doesn't help your overall win strategy. For example, your foil Tarmogoyf isn't going to be horribly useful in most Commander games, and neither will an Invention Ether Vial. Just because you've cracked it in a pack during draft doesn't mean you should automatically put that $200 card in your EDH deck. You may generate some oohs and ahs at your table, but save the bling for something more useful, like your deck box. Thanks again for watching this holiday EDH-miss episode of Tolarian Tutor. Today, we covered tips and strategies to become a more focused and effective Commander player, including Figuring out what your plan is and keeping to it, evaluating cards within the framework of linear versus exponential value, when to interact with threats and how to identify them, falling into the pitfalls of blinging out your deck. This is Tolarian Community College. I'm the professor. Our professional consultant is my own tutor, Emma Handy. Michelle Rapp is our script supervisor. And remember, it's not about winning individual games of Magic. It's about getting better, win or lose. And have a wonderful, happy EDHmas. And that is a gift wrap on Season 1 of Tolarian Tutor. But don't worry, we're getting ready to start Season 2 at the start of next year. So what lessons and videos do you want to see Emma Handy, Michelle Rapp, and myself work on? Let me know in the comments below. And remember, if you feel that this series is of value to you, you can support it by going to our Patreon over at patreon.com. Tolarian Tutor is indeed one of the most complex and, yes, expensive series to make because it involves multiple people and a lot of work just to make these 10-minute videos. If you enjoy them, if you think they are of some value to you, or if you think the other videos here at Tolarian Community College have that value, then please consider going over to patreon.com and chipping a buck in the tip jar.